I get slightly grumpy because I can't hear what's going on. Then kind of I don't really want to be there after that.
I felt stupid. I felt a bit isolated. I felt like people had to repeat themselves to me all the time.
People are so frankly crap at, you know, just being clear and being calm and being patient.
I can't hear the quality of sound. That's what I miss. You have to work an awful lot harder in your mind to break out what's being said.
Children, completely introverted, upset.
Certainly in my middle school playground, first day in school, mess around the playground before registration starts. And then the playground seemed to empty, apart from a couple of us in the corner. We were just playing as you do as kids. And the teacher came across rather roughly and just said, "The bell's gone. Are you deaf or something?" I went, "Yes." And I had to catch him out. But that was my earliest experience of that being something in my brain was actually I have been affected by something which had happened around me.
I was aware that I was saying to people more often, um, "Pardon, can you repeat yourself?" Um, and some people that didn't speak clearly, I struggled to understand. If people looked directly at me and spoke clearly, I could understand what they were saying. But I'd kind of got used to lip reading.
Over time, I got more adept at kind of lip reading, but I got adept at lip reading in 4 different languages. Because there's Bengali, there's Urdu, there's Hindi, there's English, there's Punjabi. So there's 5 different languages. And I'm speaking to all these people in my family. Um, and also in the Asian community, I think, particularly around all disabilities, but deafness as well, they're difficult conversations because I don't think necessarily in our communities um, they are embraced in the same way. A couple of my aunties were just like, "You'll never be able to get married. People are going," and so you kind of think, well, you've got a lot of learning to do because that's how it works.
Yeah.
They start to see the character and not the disability. They'll see the person and not the wheelchair or the sticks or the ears. They start to, and I hope that if that continues, that all through their school age, when they come out of school, they get into a workplace setting, that also normal and those prejudices stop. They stop because we teach our children.
So, initially, I actually just wanted to know why you agreed to be a part of my project.
I think for me, as a hearing aid wearer, you know, I wear, no pun intended, I wear my deafness quite lightly. And I think part of that reason is because, my life is better because I wear a hearing aid. I know that much. But I don't think people always appreciate that I do have a hearing impairment. And I also don't think that people, and I talk about it on stage sometimes, that people don't really take deafness as seriously as other more visible disabilities.
Yeah.
And that, I don't want to play disability top trumps, but hearing is one of the key senses. And if you don't have it, um, life changes quite a bit and really know how it does. So when I saw your message, I thought to myself, well, what better way than for younger people to hear what I have to say and what my experiences are? And hopefully someone somewhere will resonate with it and say, okay, yeah, this is important. I think, especially for younger people to see, I'm not saying that I'm doing anything remarkable, but if a young person sees that I'm getting on with my life and doing stuff at a young, and they can hopefully
Yeah.
say, well, hold on, I can do the same thing. So that's why.
As somebody that has been on television, I wanted to speak to you about the world of TV and how they adapt themselves to somebody with hearing aids or somebody that is profoundly deaf. What kind of things they adapt in terms of the studio or in terms of the production.
TV is an interesting thing because there's a lot of talk on TV about representation, be it more visible disabilities, wheelchair users, neurodiverse, whatever it might be. But the way TV is set up isn't necessarily always conducive to allowing people like that to flourish. And for me, as a hearing aid wearer, studios are big spaces and the walls aren't great, and the acoustics are terrible, huge audiences, and I can't really do much to change those things. I can't ask them to have better soundproofing in the studio when they need sound to jump off the walls. It's like I've done some gigs in churches and they're awful for me because I can't hear anything really because the acoustics are too good. So then it becomes a case of, well, okay, I need to have really open, honest conversation with these producers and say, if you want me to be my best, you have to understand that I wear a hearing aid. And maybe that's not a world you understand. But from my experience, these are the things that I find really difficult. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, in that case, if you're on a panel show, we'll make sure that you're sat in a place that is less. So for example, the second episode, I believe I was sat next to Dara, which was further away from the audience and closer to stuff that was closer to me. So the sound and bounce off. So things like that, minor adjustments. So it'd be interesting to see as my career grows how it goes. I did QI recently, which was, I don't know when you're going to release this. It was aired yesterday, and that was in a different studio. So again, I couldn't necessarily have that conversation first off because also you're a bit nervous, aren't you? You don't want to be too much of an inconvenience. But, hey, I'm also deaf. Give me red-coloured M&Ms and make sure they sound. Imagine that. Imagine that was a diva kind of thing. That was very specific requests for my hearing impairment. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see over the next 10 years how much more accommodating TV becomes for people, not just my disability, but of many others. The other thing as well, I don't know why people do this, is so for example, if you saw someone in a wheelchair, you wouldn't walk faster next to them, right? Because people see my hearing aid, they talk louder, and you're thinking, no, what are you doing? Stop you're screaming at me. So that was supermarkets when the cashier would be like, do you want all these beans? You're like, well, yes, I do.
Yes, please, thank you.
1 in 6 of the UK adult population is affected by hearing loss. And at least 4.4 million people with hearing loss are of working age.
I think for me, as I was going through that phase of, especially going from middle to secondary became, you're a smaller fish, bigger pond, there's a lot more people around you, and you didn't want to be noticed for anything untoward, which you would then be almost picked out of the crowd, if you like. And I didn't want that. So they wouldn't be in for long periods of time. And it wasn't until kind of later adulthood that it was a necessity. I realised how much I was getting tired, how much I was missing, how many things I wouldn't go to because I felt there wasn't much point. I wasn't included in something. It wasn't because I wasn't being included. It was more that I was excluding myself, purely because it was easier not to be somewhere than it was to be somewhere and miss half the conversation. So it became a little reclusive in that. But I think, yeah, absolutely. I think as I am now, I'm much happier with them. The amount I now hear is silly not having them in. I think I said before, we had during the furlough period, we had some staff who decided to learn sign language as well at a particular level. And that sign language has helped them to communicate very small snippets to people who are profoundly deaf and use signing. Tend to find that we do get a lot of people coming along who say, why are you going to theatre if you can't hear it? Because it's a social experience. They're coming along with other people, do like theatre, they understand it, they can follow it, they can't necessarily hear it all the time. So they'll come along to those sign performances, which I think are a little helpful. But it's helpful to have that front of house staff, which is that hospitality greeting, rather than just being lost in the crowd. When the bell goes off to say there's 5 minutes before the show starts, they've got no idea. But we can identify who they are. We can help them out without singling them out, if you know what I mean.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I've done the same. So there's been some free sign language classes that someone shared that came up on my Facebook. which has just been the basics. So literally like almost greetings, weather, food, things like that. And I've previously worked in retail and know that you would love if someone profoundly deaf came in, you would love to be able to just welcome them in. It feels unfair for them to have to try and put all the effort in without you giving any effort back. When it is, I mean, it's not easy to learn, but it's not insanely difficult to understand. And actually,
I think it's appreciated as well if you can make that small bit of effort just to say hello and welcome, and toilet to this way and the theatre doors up that way. Show starts in X minutes. I think that makes a difference to that person's experience, that they may want to come back again rather than being excluded all the time. So I've never seen it as something. I don't think I've seen it as something to hold me back, but it has held me back. I don't that way. But it's just in the last few years where I've been wearing them more constantly. I find that I'm progressing better. I'm more refreshed. I'm not so tired trying to listen and read people, because you're always having to look at them. It's tiring. It's absolutely exhausting, and you get tired quicker, and you just choose to move away from some conversation because what day is it? It's 2:30. I didn't hear it right. If you don't hear it, you don't want to be made to look a fool.
Research in 2014 on the experience of people with hearing loss in employment found that almost 3/4 of respondents felt that their employment opportunities were limited because of their hearing loss. 70% agreed that their hearing loss sometimes prevented them from fulfilling their potential at work. Just over 2/3 agreed that they sometimes felt isolated at work because of their hearing loss. 2/5 had retired early due to the impact of their hearing loss and struggles with communication at work.
Firstly, I just kind of wanted to ask you about your experiences with hearing and hearing loss.
Probably it was only when my tinnitus got really bad that I went to ENT and then found out my hearing was far worse than I anticipated, and was given NHS hearing aids, which weren't very good. So as soon as we started wearing masks at work for everything, I just could not hear what people were saying. So I upgraded them and went private instead. Because if people, especially with the mask on, are looking away from you and talking, it's very hard to understand what people are saying. So if they're looking directly at you, even with a mask, if they speak clearly, you can understand what they're saying.
And then I guess in terms of what you do for a living, working in the ambulance service, I guess more recently you've been majorly affected, what with everyone wearing the masks. So I was just interested to know how in your line of work you think this has affected you.
I have a completely different stethoscope to everybody else.
Right.
So my stethoscope, when I can get it to work properly, I can Bluetooth it directly into my hearing aids without the need to connect things and everything else. My hearing aids are so small that people don't even notice them. So, some people think you're being a bit funny when you don't actually hear what they say, sometimes the first 2 times. But then when you point out that you've got hearing aids, they then cut you a bit of slack and repeat it again. But one of the things I'm going to learn to do at some point, not because my hearing's that bad, but I just think it would be useful for me now to learn sign language, purely because I've come across a lot of people at work, patient-wise, that are deaf. And I learned the other day that apparently it's quite rude if you automatically start writing things down and don't make an effort to kind of engage with them. So I thought if I can learn the basics of sign language, then if I come across people with sort of severe hearing problems, then I stand a better chance of being able to communicate with them.
Yeah, I guess that's important for a lot of people in any job, really, to have even the simplest of BSL Learn, just so that they can communicate easier with someone with hearing issues.
Yeah, it's something that wasn't really thought of. And people say, well, if you've got a severe hearing problem, how can you sort of carry on working for the emergency services? Well, that's what hearing aids are for.
People can work for it, do any job, and there are people working in the emergency services, and that shouldn't stop them if that's what they want to do.
And it's about enabling us to have open conversations.
Those people who are differently abled have an ability, and they have a skill set and experience to share with the world.